Ombe's rotation had carried the Xingu continent fully into the centre of the dark side, as the Royal Navy flyer Ralph Hilch was using passed over the outskirts of Pasto. The city was situated on the western coast, growing out from the falling jumbo seaport in a sustained 100-year development spree. It was flat country, ideal for urbanization, placing minimal problems in the path of the ambitious civil engineers. Most of the level districts were laid out in geometric patterns, housing estates alternating with broad parks and elaborate commercial districts. Hills, such as they were, had been claimed by the richer residents for their chateaux and mansions. Accessing the flyer's sensor suite, Ralph could see them standing proud in their own lakes of illumination at the centre of large sable-backed grounds. The narrow, brightly lit roads, which wound around the hills, were the only curves amid the vast grid of brilliant orange lines spread out below him. Pasto looked so beautifully crisp and functional, a grand symbol of the kingdom's economic prowess, like a merit badge pinned on the planet. And somewhere down there, amid all that glittering regimented architecture and human dynamism, were people who could bring the whole edifice crashing down, probably within a couple of days, certainly no more than a week. Cahal Fitzgerald angled the flyer towards the big cube-shaped building which was the Xingu Police Force headquarters. They landed on a roof pad, at the end of a row of small arrowhead plan-form hypersonic planes. Two people were waiting for Ralph at the bottom of the air stairs. Landon McCulloch, the police commissioner, was a hale 70-year-old, almost 2 meters tall, with thick, crew-cut ginger hair, dressed in a midnight blue uniform with several silver stripes on his right arm. Beside him was Diana Tiernan, the police department's technology division chief, a fragile elderly woman dwarfed by her superior officer, a contrast which tended to emphasize her scholarly appearance.
"I appreciate you coming down," Landon said as he shook hands with Ralph. "It can't have been an easy choice for you to face this thing again. The data package briefing I've had from Admiral Farquhar gave me a nasty jolt. My people aren't exactly geared up to cope with this kind of incident."
"Who is?" Ralph said, a shade too mordantly. "But we coped on Lalonde, and we aim to do a little better here."
"Glad to hear it,"
Landon said gruffly. He nodded crisply to the other 3 ESA agents coming down the air stairs, Will and Dean carrying their combat gear in a couple of bulky bags. His lips twitched in a memory-induced smile of admiration as he eyed the 2 G-66 division troopers.
"Been a while since I was at that end of an operation,"
he murmured. "Any update on the plane which was shot down?" Ralph asked, as they all walked towards the waiting lift. "Nobody survived, if that's what you mean," Diana Tiernan said. She gave Ralph a curious look. "Was that what you meant?"
"They're tough bastards," Will said curtly.
She shrugged. "I accessed a recording of Atkinson's datavice. This energy manipulation ability Savion Kerwin demonstrated seemed quite extraordinary." "He didn't show you a tenth of what he could do," Ralph said. The lift doors closed, and they descended to the command center. It had been designed to handle every conceivable civil emergency, from a plane crash in the heart of the city to outright civil war, a windowless room which took up half of the floor. 24 separate coordination hubs were arranged in 3 rows, circles of consoles with 15 operators apiece. Their access authority to the continent's net was absolute, providing them with unparalleled sensor coverage and communications linkages. When Ralph walked in, every seat was taken. The air seemed almost solid with the laser light speckles thrown off by hundreds of individual AV projection pillars. He saw Leonard DeVille sitting at Hub 1, a raised ring of consoles in the middle of the room. The Home Office minister's welcoming handshake lacked the sincerity of McCulloch's. Ralph was quickly introduced to the others at Hub 1, Warren Aspinall, the Prime Minister of the Xingu Continental Parliament, Vicky Keogh, who was McCulloch's deputy, and Bernard Gibson, the police armed tactical squad commander. One of the AV pillars was projecting an image of Admiral Farquhar.
"All air traffic was shut down 20 minutes ago," said Landon McCulloch. "Even police patrol flights are down to a complete minimum."
"And the crews of those that are still in the air have been required to datavise files from their neural mnemonics to us here," Diana said. "That way we can be reasonably certain that none of them have been infected by Tramaco or Galahar." "That was an awful lot of traffic using the city roads when I flew over," Ralph said. "I'd like to see that shut down now.
I can't emphasize enough that we must restrict the population's movement. It's only 10 o'clock in Pasteur, Leonard Deville said. People are still on their way home. Others are out for the evening and will want to return later. If you shut down the city's ground traffic now, you will cause an astounding level of confusion, one which would be beyond the police force's ability to resolve for hours. And we must have the police in reserve to deal with the embassy people when we detect them. We thought it made more sense to allow everyone to go home as normal, then introduce the curfew. That way, the vast majority will be confined to their houses come tomorrow morning, and if Tremarco and Galahad have started infecting them, any outbreak will be localized, which means we should be able to isolate it relatively easily. Sit down and make an impact? Why not? Ralph thought sourly. I'm supposed to listen and advise, not barge in and act like a loudmouth arsehole. Damn, but Kerwin in the plane has me hyped too hot. Trying to hide how foolish he felt, he asked, "What time will you introduce the curfew?" 1 o'clock, the Prime Minister said. Only die-hard nightbirds will still be out and about then. Thank heaven it's not Saturday night. We really would have been in trouble then. Okay, I can live with that, Ralph said. There was a quick victory smile on Deville's face, which Ralph chose to ignore. What about the other cities and towns? And more importantly, the motorways? All Zangu's urban areas are having their curfew enacted at 1 o'clock, McCulloch said. The continent's got 3 time zones, so it'll be phased in from the east. As for the motorways, we're already shutting down their traffic, so cities and major towns are going to be segregated. That wasn't a problem. All motorway vehicles are supervised by the Transport Department route and flow management computers. It's the vehicles on the minor roads which are giving us a headache. They're all switched to autonomous control processors, and even worse are the farm vehicles out there in the countryside. Half of those bloody things have manual steering. We estimate it will take another 3 hours to completely shut down all ground traffic movement, Diana said. At the moment, we're setting up an interface between Strategic Defense Command and our Police Traffic Division. That way, when the low-orbit SD sensor satellites locate a vehicle moving on a minor road, they'll perform an identification sweep and catalogue it. Traffic Division will then datavise the control processor to halt. For manually operated vehicles, we'll have to dispatch a patrol car. A hand waved lamely in the air. That's the theory, anyway. A continent-wide detection and identification operation is going to tie up an awful lot of processing power, which we really can't spare right now. If we're not very careful, we'll wind up with a capacity shortfall. I thought that was impossible in this day and age, Warren Aspinall interjected mildly. Diana's humour became stern. Under normal circumstances, yes, but what we're attempting to do has no precedent. She offered the others, sitting at Hub 1, a reluctant shrug. My team has got 3 AIs in the basement and 2 at the university, which are attempting to access and analyze every single processor in the city simultaneously. It's a refinement of Admiral Farquhar's idea of tracking the energy virus through the electronic distortion it generates. We've seen it demonstrated on Atkinson's plane, so we know the approximate nature of the beast. All we have to do is perform the most massive correlation exercise ever mounted. We find out which processors have suffered glitches during the last 8 hours, and cross-reference the time and geographical location. If it happened to several unrelated processors in the same area at the same time, then it's a good chance the glitch was caused by someone who has the virus. Every processor? Vicky Keogh queried. Every single one. Just for a moment, Diana's dried-up face wore an adolescent smile. From public net processors to streetlight timers, AV adverts, automatic doors, vending machines, mechanoids, personal communications blocks, household supervisor arrays. The lot. Will it work? Ralph asked. No reason why not. As I said, there's a possible capacity problem, and the AIs might not manage to format the correlation program within the time frame we need, but when the program comes online, it should provide us with the electronic equivalent of seeing footprints in snow. And then what? Warren Aspinall asked quietly. That's what you were really brought down here for, Ralph? What do we do with these people if we find them? There is something of a political dimension involved in using the SD systems every time we locate one of the afflicted. I don't dispute the necessity of eliminating Atkinson's plane,
and people will certainly agree to us using force to obliterate the threat to start with. But ultimately, we have to find a method of eradicating the energy virus itself, and without damaging the victim. Not even the princess can go on authorizing such destruction forever, not when it's aimed against the kingdom's own subjects.
"We're working on it," said Admiral Farquhar. "Gerald Skibbo is going into personality debrief right now. If we can find out how he was infected and how he was purged, then we ought to be able to come up with a solution, some kind of countermeasure."
"How long will that take?" Leonard Deville asked.
"Insufficient information," the Admiral answered. "Skibbo isn't very strong. They're going to have to go easy on him."
"Yet if our preparations are to mean anything," Landon McCulloch said, "we have to catch the embassy duo tonight, or tomorrow morning at the latest. And not just them, but anyone they've come into contact with. The situation could escalate beyond our ability to contain. We must have a policy ready for dealing with them. So far, the only thing we know that works is overwhelming firepower."
"I've got 2 things to offer," Ralph said. He looked at Bernard Gibson and gave him a penitent smile. "Your squads are going to have to take the brunt of this, especially to start with." The police AT squad commander grinned. "What we get paid for." "Okay, here it is then. First off, contact with someone who is carrying the energy virus doesn't necessarily mean you contract it yourself. Will and Dean are excellent proof of that. They captured Skibbo, they manhandled him, they were in very close proximity to him for hours, and they're both fine. Also, I was on the Equan with the embassy trio for a week, and I wasn't infected. Secondly, despite their power, they can be intimidated into submission. But you have to be prepared to use ultra-violence against them, and they have to know that. One hint of weakness, one hesitation, and they'll hit you with everything they've got. So when we do find the first one, it'll be me and my team which heads the actual assault. Okay? I'm not arguing so far," Bernard Gibson said. "Good. What I envisage is spreading the experience of an assault in the same fashion the virus is spread. Everyone who was with me on the first assault will be able to familiarize themselves with what has to be done. After that, you assign them to head their own squads for the next round of captures and so on. That way we have your whole division brought up to speed as swiftly as possible." "Fine. And what do we do with them once we've subdued them?" "Shove them into Zero Tau."
"You think that's what got rid of Skibbo's virus?" Admiral Farquhar asked sharply.
"I believe it's a good possibility, sir. He was extremely reluctant to enter the pod in Equan. Right up until then he was quite docile. When he found out we were going to put him in the pod, he became almost hysterical. I think he was frightened. And certainly when he came out of the pod at this end, the virus was gone." "Excellent." Warren Aspinall smiled at Ralph. "That course of action is certainly more palatable than lining them all up against a wall and shooting them. Even if Zero Tau isn't responsible for erasing the virus, we know it can contain them the same way it holds ordinary people," Ralph said. "We can keep them in stasis until we do find a permanent solution."
"How many Zero Tau pods have we got available?"
Landon asked Diana. The technology division chief had a long blink, while her neural mnemonics chased down the relevant files. "Here in the building there are 3. Probably another 10 or 15 in the city in total. They tend to be used almost exclusively by the space industry." "There's 5,000 unused pods in the Equan right now," Ralph pointed out. "That ought to be enough if this AI correlation program works. Frankly, if we need more than that, we've lost." "I'll get some maintenance crews to start disconnecting them straight away," Admiral Farquhar said. "We can send them down to you in cargo flyers on automatic pilot." "That just leaves us with forcing infected people into them," Ralph said. He caught Bernard's gaze. "Which is going to be even worse than capturing them." "Possible trace," Diana announced without warning as she received a data device from one of the AIs. Everyone sitting at Hub 1 turned their attention on her. "It's a taxi which left the spaceport 20 minutes after the Embassy Trio's spaceplane arrived. The vehicle's processor array started suffering some strange glitches 5 minutes later. Contact was lost after a further 2 minutes. But it can't have been a total shutdown, because traffic control has no record of a breakdown in that sector this afternoon. It simply dropped out of the route and flow control loop.